to my channel. I'm Nurse Dre, and we do a lot of true crime on my channel, homeopathy. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, make sure you do hit that subscribe button and click that little bell so I show up in your inbox every single week with one of the true crime videos. Today we're talking about a nun who actually went missing in the early morning hours, and when they found her, she was not in too good of condition. We're also going to be talking about the curse of her killer, and it may be a real curse because there's been about 20 people that have suffered at the hand of this curse, y'all. So stay till the end and make sure you listen for what this curse is all about. It's crazy. Today we're talking about the story of Johnny Garrett and a nun named Sister Todia Benz, who was a woman in her 70s and had been a nun all of her life, and her life would tragically come to an end on Halloween in 1981. So this is Sister Todia Benz. She was a nun at a convent in Amarillo, Texas, and she had been a nun her whole life, of course dedicated to the Bible and God. And these are some of the nuns that she worked with. Y'all, check out these hats. Like, I can't believe they wear these hats. I don't know. Don't ask me, do not ask me. I don't know where these hats came from, but they're funny looking, aren't they? So what happened to Sister Todia Benz? Well, on Halloween night, she went to bed after her, nunly duties, and everything was normal. In the morning, when all of the other nuns went to morning mass at 6:30 a.m., Sister Todia would not show up for mass, which was unusual because everyone showed up for every mass. That's what they do. And so one of her nun friends goes to check on her and unfortunately finds her body brutally murdered. She'd been beaten, stabbed, raped. She had been brutally murdered. And at first, the nuns didn't really know what to do, and they didn't contact police at first. So the nuns were thinking, oh crap, what if the killer is still in the building, in the nunnery? So they go look around and make sure he's not in the building, or she, and they find in the very low level of the building, there's a broken window. Now it's weird because the broken window, the glass is broken inward, like someone had broken, but there's no glass on the outside of the window because, like, if somebody broke in that window and went and did this to Sister Todia and then came back out the window, there would be glass on the outside on the ground, but there wasn't any. And later they would find blood on a door that heads outside but had been locked. It's a very suspicious surroundings in the case. So some evidence would be able to be found. There was a wadded up white t-shirt at the base of the bed of Sister Todia's bed, and there was semen collected in the rape kit. There were fingerprints collected that were not the nuns' fingerprints. There was curly, what looked to be African American hair, head hair and pube hair at the scene. There was also this really creepy man, apparently a Hispanic man with a Spanish kind of accent, that had called the convent at 2 a.m. asking to speak to the priest because of his uncontrollable sexual desires. And so police really thought that this was probably their guy and they had to track him down. The only problem was the cops and how they handled the whole case. Like, they were not working together. The police stations were not working together to investigate the crime. There was competition building up between the police stations about it. It was just a lot of poor quality. The way that they handled the evidence was not professional. They lost some of the evidence. Danny Hill was the new DA. He was corrupt in some ways. He had a lot of cases on his hands at the moment and was basically just, brushing this to the side and wanting to pin somebody, just anybody, just to get a conviction for the public's view and throw them in jail. And that would be the end of it, no matter if they were guilty or not, basically. Now, police did think that this was connected to a murder that had happened a few weeks before Halloween, before Sister Todia's murder. Nardi Buck Bryson was also an elderly lady in the area of Amarillo, Texas, and she was murdered on July 9, 1981. She had been found in her bed, brutally beaten and stabbed and raped as well. And there was a white t-shirt at the foot of her bed that was left there as well. And there were hairs collected that matched the identity of the hairs that were found at Sister Todia's crime scene. And so they thought that these were connected, but they needed to do a lot of pathology, so they sent this evidence off to the lab. There was also a dark-skinned man that had been seen walking away from each one of the crime scenes at the time of the murders, and police thought this could be their man as well. And they thought that he wasn't just like doing this as a sex crime, or he was, you know, mad at the person. They thought that he was waging an all-out war on God, because both of these women were very religious. Of course, one of them was a nun. So they thought that this was something that he had against God, that he was taking out against God, and he was doing this to retaliate. Now, at the time, Cuban fugitives were coming from Cuba to the United States to escape what was going on in their country at the time. And most of them were either Hispanic or African American, skin toned, and had that curly kind of hair. And so they were going to question every single one of them. Among these men were two friends, Fernando Flores and Leoncio Roet. I can't do the names, y'all, you know that. Leoncio Rueda. Both had records of being peeping toms, okay? They had both broken in through windows before. They had been looking in people's windows and getting caught just peeping tomming people, you know, just looking at people and kind of stalking women. And so they bring these two guys in, and they, after interviewing both of them, Fernando Flores could not provide an alibi for the night of the murders. And after a little bit of more like interrogating him, they decided that they thought that they could at least hold him for a little while on the murder of Sister Todia, and they went ahead and arrested him, and they let his friend Rueda go. So they decided to search Flores's house, and at his residence they found little blue fibers that would end up matching Sister Todia's blue nightgown that she was wearing the night of the murder, and they were on his clothes. So it's looking pretty damning evidence right now. However, on November 7th, 1981, they found out that the hairs found at the crime scene and the fingerprints found at the crime scene did not match Flores. They ended up letting him go. So the killer's still on the loose, and the police are still not working together as a team. You know, the stations are not working together to do any kind of real investigation, and the nuns are very disappointed in this. So they end up asking for help from a local psychic to give them some insight of what happened. They would end up turning to a woman named Bubbles Patterson, who actually had worked with the police before. She said to them that she had had a dream about the case. Right after the murders happened, she had a dream about the murderer. She had seen his face, and his face looked like an Abraham Lincoln kind of face, like a long face. He was 5'11" with large ears. He was very muscular, a handsome man, young man. But get this, not only does she have the description of the man, she also has the name and address of the killer, and police are intrigued. She states that the address is 4000 Northeast 18th Street, and the name Mr. Clyde. Now, the only problem with this is her husband is actually under a snitch deal with the police. He had been caught trafficking drugs in a previous year, and he was turned out to be a snitch for the police in order to not go to jail. So how reliable is her information? I don't know. We'll find out though. Sorry guys, I got called into work, so it's a little bit later. If anything looks a little bit different, I'm so sorry. Anyways, back to our story. Meanwhile, as the cops are speaking to Bubbles about this person that she's seen in her dream, and she has this address and a name for investigators, a new suspect emerges out of the town. And that would be 17-year-old Johnny Garrett. Ironically, Johnny does kind of look like Abe Lincoln, and he's very muscular. He's kind of got large ears, and the most ironic part of it all, you guys, is Johnny lives at the very address that the woman Bubbles had told the investigators about. And not only that, he actually has a dog named Mr. Clyde. Literally, that's painted on the dog's doghouse outside. It couldn't be closer to what Bubbles had predicted, right? I mean, how would she know all this stuff though? It's kind of weird, and it kind of makes me think, like, what were her intentions Did she have some beef with this family and she was trying to throw Johnny under the bus? I don't know. And even though it's very incriminating, it's all circumstantial, so it's not real evidence. It just makes the police want to actually speak to this Johnny guy. So they bring him in to speak to him. But the only real evidence that they have that he could possibly be involved in the murder of the nun is that on the night of the murders, on Halloween night, he was actually witnessed by a police officer standing outside his house beating his bushes with a stick. A stick. Just kidding. That's not all they had. They actually had physical evidence as well. They had 2 fingerprints of Johnny's were in the room of the nun, and one of them was actually on the headboard. So it's not looking good for Johnny. But let's take a look at Johnny and who is Johnny Garrett? Let's take a look at him for a minute. Johnny Garrett was born on Christmas Eve in 1963 in Amarillo, Texas. Now, Johnny was mentally impaired. He had known brain damage and he was chronically psychotic. His teachers would say that they thought that he had some form of mental retardation. At the least, he had some severe kind of learning disability because by the time he reached 6th grade, he still could not read or write. So there was something going on with Johnny. And his IQ was very low. I think it was like in the 40s, which, you know, I think average is like 70 or something like that, like 70 to 90. So yeah, it was very low. And when it came to being a mature person, Johnny wasn't exactly as mature as a normal 17-year-old boy should actually be. So when we see that he's standing outside his house beating the bushes with a stick at 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe that's not so weird for Johnny. And his family would say it wasn't. You know, if he couldn't sleep, they would find him doing things like this. So that evidence is not very incriminating. Kitty, quit eating the pillows! Kitty, you can't eat the pillows! On top of the mental retardation issue, Johnny had really severe family issues as a child. One of the mental health experts that actually would go on to evaluate Johnny would say that this was one of the worst cases of neglect and abuse for children that he had seen in his entire career. Johnny's stepfather would rape him, would beat him, would actually like solicit him to his friends to be raped, like gang raped, you know, and they were having parties and stuff like that. And it would get so bad for Johnny that sometimes he would sleep under the bleachers in the football field of his school because he just did not want to go home. It was that bad. And for him to have a mental retardation of some sort of, you know, impairment, I can only imagine what he was thinking and how his mind was processing this abuse. And it just kind of made the fact that Johnny had gone through all this and also that he had this mental retardation, probably from being beat on the head, it made for police and the DA to just really want to prosecute him. He was the villain. I mean, it made sense that he would have done this crime because he had been raised being raped and abused. And that's what most serial killers are. They're just abused as children and they grow up to kill people. And with his mental retardation, maybe he didn't even know what was going on when he killed her, didn't mean to. And this kind of stuff, that's what happens sometimes. And so it made Johnny look very suspiciously guilty. And it made for an easy case for the DA. And remember, I said, this DA was ready to just throw somebody in jail, anybody in jail. Just get this case off of his hands. So for Johnny to show up, it wasn't good for him. And we'll talk about this later, but as Johnny would go up for trial for the murder of this nun, for some reason, the judge would not allow for the evidence of these mental evaluations and the fact that Johnny had brain damage and some mental retardation and all that this abuse. They did not let the jury know about any of it at all. So when the jury's deliberating and deciding if he's guilty or not, they don't have that information. And also when he's being sentenced, they don't have that information. They could go for the death penalty and be killing a 17-year-old child who has issues. No one knows, but we'll talk about that later. So after an hour of being arrested, police state that Johnny Garrett confessed to the murder of Todia Benz, and it's very questionable. First of all, the confession that was typed up, okay, you know, most people write their confessions when they confess. They write them handwriting, but this was a typed up confession, and Johnny actually refused to sign that confession. He wasn't going to sign it. he stated that he never said any of it, that the police made it up. No. The suspicious thing about all this that makes that sound very true is the fact that they actually recorded all of his interrogation up until the point that he confessed. And for some reason, they didn't have his confession on tape. So no one can verify if he actually confessed or not. Okay, so the actual confession says that Johnny got drunk and he got high off of paint thinner, sniffing paint, and he entered the convent and found Sister Tobias and went in her room, began to rape her, saw that she was going to scream, so he put his hand over her mouth and beat, raped, stabbed her to death so that she didn't scream and wake anybody up and he didn't get caught. And he had gained access through that convent through that window that was broken, and then he had left through that window that was broken. The only problem with this is none of that matches up with the actual evidence at the crime scene. And if they had actually taken real evidence information down and actually done the investigation right, they would have known this anyway, so that when they fabricated his confession, they would have made the evidence line up. However, because remember at the beginning I said when they saw this broken window, there was no glass on the outside of the window, which meant that the killer had not exited the convent through that window that he had entered through. He had actually exited through another door that was supposedly locked. They didn't know how he got through it, but there was blood on it, and that's how they think he got out. Also, it was pitch black, dark in this convent. Literally no lights on. So how would he have actually seen her face to know that she was about to scream, to even cover it up? I don't know. After Johnny confessed, a lawyer would show up at the prison to represent Johnny, and this would be a man named Bill Coleus. But this is also another weird thing that adds to the weirdness of this case, because when you are convicted of a crime, you have to find your own attorney. Like, attorneys don't just come to you and represent you. You have to find one, unless it's like a high profile case, in which at this point, this case was not high profile at all. So it was kind of weird that this guy just showed up to represent Johnny, but the family had no idea how the law worked or where to find an attorney. They were just happy that someone was willing to represent him at the time, and so they hired him. But who was it that called and asked for his services for Johnny? That's what we have to wonder. Was it the police? And was he in on all of this with the DA? Comment down below who you think is the real killer at this point. And do you think that the DA and this lawyer are working together to get Johnny convicted? Let me know down below. So Mr. Coleus tells Garrett that there's no hope for you, dude. They're gonna convict you and you're gonna go to prison for life. You might as well, sign the confession and be guilty, because if you go in front of a jury, you're not going to win, period. They have way too much evidence against you. Now, y'all, a real attorney would have been like, all right, let's do this. Where's your alibi? Let's crush this evidence. Let's hire somebody. Let's find out why your fingerprints are in there. Like, they would be working for you. Not being like, oh, let's throw our hands up in the air. That's why it looks so suspicious. This guy is weird, suspicious, like he's working for the police. So 2 days after Johnny is arrested, he goes to his arraignment and he tells the judge, look, judge, the reason that my fingerprints are in that room and on that furniture is because I frequented the convent. Like, he would go there just to look at the art that was at the convent, the beautiful statues, the paintings, the glass that was painted, everything. He loved to look at the art. And on one instance, he actually helped the sisters move some furniture around. And so, of course, his fingerprints would be on the furniture somewhere. And that's his explanation for why it was there. And he swears he was at home that night, which is why the police officer saw him that night at his house. So Johnny would go on to his trial, and just briefly, I'm going to run down through some of the crap that the police pulled that is like crazy evident. Who do you think you are? Let's go through some of this crazy evidence that doesn't make any sense at all. First of all, they never let Johnny tell the jury about how the fingerprints got on the nun's bed frame. They never let them find out that he had some kind of mental retardation or this abuse that happened. They never let Johnny tell his side of the story, none of it. And the defense never hired any kind of investigator at all, which is that's the first thing you do when you're convicted of murder. And the pubic hair that was at the scene did not match Johnny's. There were other fingerprints found at the scene as well that did not match Johnny's though. They couldn't find out who it matched to. And when they went to test the semen against Johnny's DNA, the sample disappeared. Just disappeared from the evidence locker. Like, it's just gone. And there was speculation that the DA had actually thrown it away. Wow. Botch it, baby. Also, some suspicious stuff would also like happen with the jury. Like, they found out that one of the jurors was really close friends with the DA in the case, and you know, like, they had pegged him guilty, so of course he's gonna make other jurors think that he's guilty. A business partner was friends with the medical examiner, and the medical examiner was also friends with the DA, and they were all in it on throwing all this evidence away and stuff. So that's 2 jurors now. One of Johnny's other attorneys, Phil Jordan, was actually childhood friends with the DA. None of the nuns that were at the actual crime scene, not the bishop, nobody was ever interviewed. They were never asked to testify. Therefore, they were never able to tell the jury that Johnny was in fact somebody who did frequent the convent and like hang out with them and help them with things. And one of the biggest things is that when you have a high profile case like this that the media is all about, usually you would move it to another town, like the trial. And that the reason is because most of the jurors know the case, and when you go into a trial, you don't want them to know anything about the case. And so if they moved it to another town, he had more chance of getting a fair conviction or a fair acquittal. But the defense did not even ask for this. His attorneys did not even ask. Ralph Erdman, the forensic pathologist in the case, was later to be found out that and convicted that he was falsifying autopsies and court documents to sway whichever way he wanted court cases to go. So in this case, it could be said that he did that same thing for Johnny Garrett. So needless to say, Johnny's trial did not go very well. He was convicted of murder. He was held at the Ellis Unit north of Huntsville, Texas, which at the time was Texas's death row, and he was sentenced to death and was to be executed on January 6, 1992. Now, this case spread wide. Not only did it go through the United States media, it was around the world. People heard about it around the world, and y'all, literally people were asking for the courts to either do another trial or to at least get rid of Johnny's sentence of death and just make it like, you know, life in prison or something because of his mental retardation and everything that he had gone through as a child. And they didn't think that with him being 17 and mentally challenged that he should be on death row. Everybody thought that that was the wrong thing to do. You don't kill a child, a mentally ill child. Literally, y'all, the Pope at the time would actually ask for clemency from the governor of Texas for this to happen, for him to get off of death row. But it all failed because the governor wouldn't do it and he never got a retrial. So here's where the craziness starts. On February 11th, 1992, he was executed. His last meal was ice cream. And while he was, strapped down to the table to be executed, they asked him, "Is there any last words you have to say?" And oh, he did. He had something to say. This is what Johnny said while he's laying there about to die. "I would like to thank my friends and my family. And I would like to thank my guru and everyone else who has helped me get through all this. For the rest of the world, well, you can kiss my ever-loving ass. Because I'm innocent. And for those responsible for my murder here tonight, you know who you are? Well, I got some words for you too. But I put those in a letter. Something for you to look forward to tomorrow." That's something I would say. Like, if I was convicted of murder and I was innocent, or either way, if I was innocent or guilty, I would definitely put a curse on my murderers. Because that's what they're doing to this child. They're murdering him. Literally. The state of Texas is murdering him, whether he was guilty or not. And I'm not saying it's okay, or what he supposedly did was okay, which I don't believe that he did this, and I'll tell you why later. But, like I said, it's a 17-year-old child who has a mental retardation that you're killing, that you're gonna murder with a botched investigation. What? So in his cell, he left a letter, and it is a long ass letter. But basically the gist of it is that he is putting a curse on every one of the people involved in his murder, like the police, the DA, the forensic pathologist, the jurors, the prosecutors, even some of the people in jail, even the warden. These people that had a hand in the play of his murder, he was cursing them. And basically he said, bad things will fall upon you. Death will fall upon you. Nobody took this letter seriously, of course, but, well, they should have, because this is what happens next. Y'all, all of these things happened like right after Johnny's death. Juror Nobella Summer fell down a flight of stairs and died a few days later because of the complications. Juror Nathan Shackelford's daughter died from an accidental gunshot wound to the head. His sister was run over and killed by a drunk driver. That's really bad luck right there. Garrett's trial lawyer, Bill Collius, died of pancreatic cancer soon after the trial. Garrett's first appellate lawyer, Bruce Sadler, and post-conviction trial judge Sam Kaiser contracted the same form of leukemia. Kaiser died after initially being cured. His healthy bone marrow, collected in case of recurrence, inexplicably disappeared from the hospital. Jimmy Don Boydston contracted leukemia and died. Like, why are these people getting leukemia? That's just a little weird. Officer Walt Yerger also died of leukemia. Stop eating the pillow, kitty! The medical examiner Ralph Erdman, the one that was corrupt and friends with the DA, he was convicted of numerous felonies for falsifying autopsy reports. His medical license was revoked and he was sent to prison. His wife died of pancreatic cancer. Eugene Heavy Duty Patterson was found dead in his vehicle. The cause was never determined. Y'all can't tell me that's not a curse. Watley, a jailhouse snitch who testified against Garrett for reduced sentence, committed suicide. Carol Moore, Garrett's school teacher who testified against him at trial, also committed suicide. The district attorney, Danny Hill, the guy that was real corrupt for this whole thing, throwing away evidence, he also committed suicide. And then his daughter hung herself a few years later. One of Garrett's many attorneys, Jeff Blackburn, lost his wife when she committed suicide. His son was accidentally locked inside a hot car in Houston and was permanently brain damaged. And last but not least, Ann Richards contracted cancer twice and finally succumbed to esophageal cancer. Now y'all cannot tell me that curse did not work. I mean, like, I don't believe in voodoo and all that kind of stuff, like curses and stuff, but let me tell you, that's 14 different things. Some of them had 2 in there, so that's almost 20 different people who died as a direct result that has some kind of direct attachment to Johnny and the case and had wronged him. None of the people that were on his side died like that. So you can't tell me that's not Johnny's curse. I just think that this is all crazy. But it would later be found out, y'all, that Johnny was in fact innocent. Due to better DNA evidence, in 2004 they did find the killer. And they found it through DNA from the lady that had first died. And they then went to Sister Tobias's case and they linked him to her DNA as well. The DNA that was found on her as well. So remember I told you guys at the beginning that they have brought some of those Cuban refugees in and spoke to them and had originally thought them as suspects, but let them go ultimately. Well, in March 2004, they were able to connect Luencio Perez Rueda, one of the guys that they had originally brought in, to the murder of the Bryson, the first lady that had died. Then they were able to link him to the murder of Sister Benz due to DNA evidence that was found on one of the blankets in the room. He eventually pled guilty to the first murder, but never pled guilty and was never even charged with the murder of Sister Benz, because Johnny had already gone down for it and they didn't want to pursue it any further. They didn't care. Great job, Amarillo Police. So now that you guys know that he was innocent, what do you think? What do you think about this case? What do you think about the curse? Do you think it was a real curse? Do you believe in curses? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and make sure you do hit that subscribe button on the way out and the bell to get all of my videos sent to your inbox every single week. I usually upload every Monday for Mystery Monday, and we'll do like random things in between of like homeopathic medicine that I'm interested in, stuff like that. Make sure you leave me a like. I will see you guys in the next video. Happy spooky Halloween. Bye guys.